Good afternoon and welcome to the Workforce Observer. We are so pleased to have with us Adam Bleibtreu, an accomplished marketing executive with over 3 decades of experience. He has transitioned from his role at ASGN, a leading provider of IT services and solutions, to engage in fractional CMO positions for staffing firms. Welcome, Adam. I want you to talk about the Gathering Summit. Describe it and share what made it unique.
Happy to. First of all, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to have a conversation with you. The Gathering is arguably the most interesting conference that I've attended in my career. I started going 3 years ago. It's a conference focusing on the art and craft of marketing, but it talks about and talks with marketing leaders versus the traditional conference circuit, which talks about the creativity of the ideas that come from the agencies. So you have the chief marketing officers from Call of Duty, from the NFL, from Yeti. You have these globally recognized brands that come and talk about their secret sauce. And the rules of engagement are such that these people, these professionals, are so open and generous with their time because no one's pitching their company. You're there to share and learn.
So really discussing ideas. So in that vein, was there any unexpected themes or moments that resonated with attendees, especially around branding and talent engagement? And then I'll bring it to our industry.
Absolutely. So wide variety of very senior marketers, people that have run community for Reddit and Pinterest, people that have really built authentic brands like Yeti, as well as huge brands like the NFL. There were a couple of moments that stood out, though, in direct reference to your question. The first was Gary Vaynerchuk, the lovely Gary V, had a wonderful keynote conversation, and a key takeaway for me in that conversation was that given the proliferation of channels that you can use to communicate in the universe we live in today, creativity wins. It's not production value. It's not having the perfect placement in a schedule. If you create messaging that's authentic and creative, the audience will actually find you and share you. So your goal should be to be as creative as you can within the confines of your brand first. The second one is a frequently used reference at the conference about Tony Hsieh, who started Zappos. And Tony said, as most people know, when he started Zappos, he said, I started a customer service company and then we sold shoes. And one of the driving sentiments across this wide variety of brands, particularly today in a somewhat polarized society in the United States, a proliferation of media channels, is that customer service wins. The last piece relevant to this conversation is that artificial intelligence, generative AI, is just a tool today. Undirected, it has very little incremental value. Until you understand what you want it to do for your business, it's really not a rabbit hole you need to run down.
That's awesome. So let's boil it down to our industry. I'm saying our staffing, workforce solutions ecosystem. What were the key insights around both employer branding and talent branding, that I guess occurred to you because you are in the industry with regard to staffing and recruiting? And maybe before you dive into the insights, it would be nice to just kind of give a short, what is talent branding and what is employer branding? Or maybe they're the same, or two sides of the same coin, just a little bit, and then talk about any insights that were gained.
Happy to at least give it a shot for you. Employer branding is the emotional relationship that the name or the logo has to its audience. If you think of Apple, if you think of Coca-Cola, if you think of Robert Half, if you think of Creative Circle, these are brands that are established in and out of the industry. If you have an emotional reaction to them, positive, neutral, or negative, that's the power of the brand.
Okay.
From a talent perspective, it's how you market yourself. And I frequently have conversations with folks that are out looking for work or looking to change careers. And the first thing that I tell them is to think of yourself as a product or a service, not a person. If you think about yourself as a person, you become incredibly tongue-tied and hung up around, did I, didn't I, how do I say it? If you stop that chain of thought and you think about yourself as a service or a brand, how would I market this product that has this skill set? That's talent branding.
Yeah, I spoke to somebody last week, a podcast guest, and it was he does talent branding at Samsara.
Yes.
I mean, so he's talking. So I said, do you talent brand contingents and contract workers? He said, we don't really use many of those contingent and contract workers, some, but usually when it's a talent branding thing, it's about one of the things he talks about is, you come in for 1 year and then you can become a full-time. You can become an employee. So he does talent branding, and it's the first time actually that I've seen someone with a job title which says talent. And he talks about both the talent and he also talks about the employer brand. So this is interesting. Okay, so any key insights from the conference with regard to both employer brand and talent brand and the staffing?
So a couple of thoughts. The first one is, from an employer's perspective, the concept of consistency builds longevity. If you want to establish a brand and you want the brand to endure, you have to be consistent about your messaging. Now, that does not mean that you can't change your path of travel through the world and the services that you provide, but you need to be consistent in the way that you present it. And that's everything from the voice bites of your recruiting team, the way that you write job board posts, all the way through the logo and the color palette and the typeface that you use. You have to be consistent. The second part is that in today's society, embracing the intersection between culture and commerce matters. And this is not a statement about diversity, equity, and inclusion or the environmental social governance part. This is about the culture of your brand, the culture that you want to represent to your audience, and the fact that you are in the business of human capital. And embracing that intersection will lead to enhancing your brand as an employer or as a company.
Okay. Are staffing firms doing this well?
No.
What are their challenges? What's the problem?
A long list that we probably don't have time for, but I can boil it down into a couple of simple things. The first thing is it's commerce. And staffing firms, for the most part, in broad categories, from the professional services side all the way down to maintenance, quick serve restaurant kind of work, hourly wage workers, is they're very concerned about speed and time, speed to market, time to fill. And they're on a very rapid hamster wheel. That does not build brand loyalty, and most of all, it does not treat your applicant with humanity or concern or kindness. And that results in such an unhappy experience for the applicant that they avoid your brand, which causes the hamster wheel to spin faster and for you to continue to propagate an inefficient way of going to market.
So when you talk, we say, staffing company's brand, say you are Apple, just because it's a well-known brand, right? And you are a staffing firm that is working for Apple, and you have a need for Apple needs X number of workers. You're out there in the market, whatever, looking for these X number of workers, specialized. So when you are talking, you're not talking about the person working for you or the staffing firm. You're talking about the person working for Apple, correct?
No, no. So
Even though it's a contract position for 6 months, there is a chance, may not be a chance, that you convert to employee status. So you're really working for the staffing firm for 6 months, say.
so
How do you approach that?
So a couple of things. First, let's not make the assumption that everyone that's working on a freelance or contingent basis wants a full-time job.
Okay.
A
Fair.
wide variety of the universe is very comfortable with a contingent or a freelance business and lifestyle. So that 1 + 1 does not equal 2.
Okay.
That aside, you are a designer, and having Apple on your resume would be an incredible fruit
Okay.
on your resume. You are qualified, and you have 3 recruiters reaching out to you from 3 different staffing firms with exactly the same job.
Okay.
Which one are you going to pick? You're going to pick the one that treated you with respect in the past. You're going to pick the one that treated you with kindness
Fair.
in the past. You're going to pick the one whose brand, corporate and personal recruiter brand, is
Right.
one that resonates with you. That recruiter, that staffing company wins versus just simply promoting a job from Apple. That's what I'm trying to say.
So it is really the relationship with the recruiter first, because that's your point of contact, and then the staffing firm that comes into IC. So
Right.
how the staffing firm presents. Okay. Okay.
And again, very quickly, you get 3 emails from 3 different staffing firms, and I won't use names for obvious reasons.
Sure.
The first thing that happens, you remember we talked about brand a moment ago where we said it's the emotional response. My
Right.
emotional response to staffing company A is I applied 3 times, I heard nothing. They're out. My emotional response to the brand of staffing company 2 is, you know what? I applied for 3 jobs. I didn't get any of them, but at every turn, I got an email, I got an update. I knew where I was in the process. I like them. Staffing company number 3, they gave you a nice auto-respond email that said, we're really, really busy and we will never get back to you. Which one are you going to pick? Number 2.
Right. I guess. Okay. So are there other common missteps the staffing firms make when it comes to approaching the contingent worker or the freelancer or the gig worker?
A lot of the time, they don't train their teams to understand the industries they're selling in and how the workforce in those industries react. Travel nurses being sold travel nursing by someone with no healthcare experience will never be able to talk to the nurse about the kind of ER room, the kind of hospital, etc. So having subject matter expertise on the recruiting team, I think, is critical to success.
Okay. That's good. So, the workforce has become more contingent, right? I mean, like you said, more people are choosing to be contractors. It's a blend. So how has your understanding of talent branding evolved? And are there approaches that work both for the contingent workforce as well as employees? Or are these 2 separate things?
Someone looking for a job is a human looking for a job. The recruitment companies, in-house or staffing companies, have justifiably resorted to technology to help them parse the significant number of applicants they get, because applying to a job is free. So of the 1,000 resumes you get for a role, 600 are simply unqualified because they're not industry knowledgeable. The 400 left you have to parse down. So in that process of rapid technological research and bringing a resume to the bottom of the funnel, you lose the humanity. At the point of contact with the human that's looking for a job, you're looking for a connection. So if you're the human, if you're the talent that's promoting your brand, you need to have keywords in your resume. You need to have a resume that's written, or a profile that's written for the industry you're applying to. There are dozens of highly qualified places, including talent branding experts, that you can go to. Generative AI can rewrite your resume in a matter of seconds. But what you're trying to do is to give the recruiter a reason to hover for more than 6.5 or 7 seconds, and to want to ask you a question when they engage with you about an interesting piece of what you've done. So when you think about your brand, you're trying to take some of your personal style and skill set and translate it into a 7-second read on pixels on a page.
Okay. All right. I guess the most impactful lessons you have learned from leaders in the space. And then part 2 is when, an example you can share, maybe something really that worked, a tactic that worked, that paid off, especially if it's in recruiting, particular specific to the recruiting industry.
So the smartest and most successful people I've had the privilege to work with in the industry really taught me that discipline and repetition builds success. Particularly if we're working at home, we have 1,001 distractions. We have the world around us we can engage in. And to be successful in the category of staffing, doing the same thing the same way every day breeds success. If you're learning a language, you do the same thing. If you're learning a sport, you do the same thing. If you're learning to knit or crochet or cook, you do the same thing. Repetition builds success, and success is the result of hard work. There's no easy way around it. Doesn't mean it has to be boring. Doesn't mean it doesn't have to be fun and you can't make it enjoyable. But success comes from disciplined repetition.
Any examples from our own industry? It doesn't have to be a recent example, but something that you've seen over your years as CMO that you said, wow. I mean, that's like a brand that is consistent, disciplined, and at the same time fun. Any examples of what they did?
Yeah, one of the companies I worked intimately with, easy to find in my LinkedIn profile, when I started working with them, I went to 6 offices in 2 weeks. And the only way I knew that the offices were different were because of regional accent and size. Bigger markets, bigger office. Every office did exactly the same thing, the same way, every portion of the day, across the board. And by the time I was done, we'd had 31 offices built that way. With that discipline and with that repetition came market-leading success, and the culture in those offices was like a brotherhood and a sisterhood that I've never seen anywhere else.
Wow. So you're saying consistency and, I guess, sameness in this is actually, it's not about being creative, in this space, really. It's more about, having a message and sticking to it. Is that fair to say?
It's more than that. It's structure. A lot of people will say that the value of going to college is to prove to your employer that you can show up on time to classes for 4 years, that you can do the tasks that are assigned to you in a meaningful and relevant way, and that you learn to think. 4-year colleges and 2-year colleges are an example of applying disciplined, repetitive behavior. Doesn't mean it wasn't fun, doesn't mean you didn't go to football games and paint your face, it doesn't mean that you didn't have a great time. Repetitive, successful behavior with discipline breeds muscle memory and mind memory so that you're not surprised, so that you're not caught off guard, so that you're representing your personal brand and your company's brand consistently in every conversation, and that breeds success. Most humans, particularly earlier in their career, which a lot of recruiters and salespeople are in this industry, left with the blue sky of ideas, get distracted. And having the focus and discipline is what will lead to success.
Okay, cool. You hear it often. You hear it, from small firms, big firms. They refer to, staffing is very commoditized. Right? That's a very common complaint that you hear it. So, go ahead.
No, I would agree completely. And it goes back to the earlier part of this conversation, which is that you can change the commoditization or the perception of commoditization by having a brand that holds to treating your clients with respect. Don't tell them you know their business. Ask them how you can help solve their problems. And on the talent side, treating people as humans, not as a commodity, and leading with kindness and empathy will build you a brand that people will choose to work with and for and move you out of the commoditization window.
No, that's great. So what changes or pivots do you see as essential in a more digital driven, talent centric environment? I mean, right now it's an employer's market, but, as we go forward, what should we as an industry be doing? Because I've heard this so much about the commoditization, and people say, they nod their head, say yeah, and then they're still moving ahead in the same way. So what can we do to be different, I guess?
Think about the last 24 hours of your life.
Yeah.
Was there a moment in the last 24 hours where someone treated you with kindness? Did someone open a door? Did someone reach and pick something up on a shelf from you at a store? Did someone say something nice to you about your appearance? Did someone let you in line in front of them at a Starbucks or at a coffee place? Was there a moment in your life where someone was kind, or in particular, a client relationship where you were treated with kindness? The chances are, if that happened to you, you have a visceral, vivid memory of it. You also have a vivid, visceral memory of being cut off, of somebody that took too long to get going after a stoplight, of somebody who did not treat the world with empathy and kindness. So taking those two examples, it suddenly becomes crystal clear as to how to move your brand into an area where it's not commoditized. Being kind doesn't cost another cent. It doesn't take another minute. It just requires you to think about humanity and the fact that we're all in this together. So I'm not suggesting everybody becomes touchy-feely and soft by any stretch of the imagination. You can say please, you can say thank you. Chick-fil-A, as an example, is so consumed with the customer experience that the majority of their employees don't say thank you. They say my pleasure. And they say my pleasure because it feels more personal to the recipient of those words. It doesn't cost them any more money to do that, but you leave the counter at Chick-fil-A feeling a better empathetic moment. That's what I'm talking about.
That's very cool. So in a digital driven world, adopt that same method in your emails and your Zoom meetings, or?
So in a digital-driven world, when you're thinking about outbound email automation, when you're thinking about your messaging, treat people with kindness. So look at the opening paragraph, look at the closing paragraph, and ask yourself, or ask your generative AI tool, because we're all using them to create the message, please rewrite this with kindness. And you'll be shocked at what comes back. Please use empathy in my opening paragraph. And you'll be shocked with what comes back. So again, didn't cost another dime, didn't take another minute.
That's very cool. Future of staffing, future of this industry. What do you see? What do you see, and what's your vision?
Oh, the great crystal ball. If I knew I could be retired, contingent labor is not going to go anywhere in the United States. It's here to stay for all of the reasons that we know. It's an effective way to deploy large groups of people or small groups of people on a project basis. It's a good way to take the cost of labor and move it into a different slot in your balance sheet. It's a great way to avoid fill in the blank. So contingent labor is not going anywhere.
Regardless of which party is in power.
Regardless of which party's in power. It's people need to work. The economy is still fueled by that. Remember that one of the largest sources of revenue for the federal government is payroll tax. So using a W-2 employment model guarantees us that the government is receiving money. It's the only part of the taxes we pay that goes into funding the federal government in that sense. So the business model is not going to go anyway, regardless of who's in power. The agencies won't go away. I think personally we'll see some consolidation because folks that have come out of a very trying time will have reached a point where they need growth capital. So I think we'll see the acquisition market heat up at the end of the first quarter. And I think that the outlook, if we have patience, will be positive.
That's great. Any advice that you have for the industry, including recruiters? It could be advice to business owners, advice to the bigger firms, and of course also to recruiters.
I think it's a great question. And I think it's a few simple thoughts. The first is we have to stay focused. If you're a business owner, we have trying economic times. We have a polarized country. We have people that are pleased and upset. We have people that are hurt and discouraged and people that feel like they won a very long battle. So stay focused on what your core competency is. First and foremost, treat your staff, your team with humility and humanity because you've got both of these folks in your company. So accept that fact and treat them fairly, number one. Number two, we are a more hybrid universe in the United States for work than we've ever been in history. However, humans as a species are a community-based animal. We live in communities. So again, you don't have to have happy hours every Friday in a virtual format with your team, but paying really close attention to the mental health and well-being of your teammates is critical to the success of your company. Pay attention to community. Pay attention to how the team is working. And then the last piece, which has been a theme for this conversation, is treat your audiences, clients, candidates, internal employees, with kindness and humanity, and I can promise you, you will be shocked with the positive outcome.
Well, it's been wonderful having you, Adam. Thank you very much. Really enjoyed the insights and have a great rest of day.